Hi, I'm Dakin Matthews, and this is Sheltering with Shakespeare. This is part 6 of our exploration of female speech in All's Well That Ends Well. To recap, we're exploring primarily the monologues and soliloquies of the female characters in this play, especially Helena, to see if they reveal something about Shakespeare's take on female desire and female activity. We choose full speeches rather than just dialogue because it is usually in soliloquies that characters reveal how they really feel, and in monologues how and what they really think about something. And All's Well, of all the comedies, has by far the largest number of such speeches by a wide margin, which makes it a particularly promising field for such exploration. So, where are we now in the story? At the midpoint of the play, right after Helena's secret departure from Rousillon to become a penitent pilgrim and seek forgiveness for her offense, which was forcing the man she loves, Bertram, to marry her, thus depriving him of his home and driving him into mortal peril on the battlefield. Now, to be fair, Bertram would have sought the battlefield whether he had married her or not. And he is free to return home at any time and work out whatever marital accommodation he can. But the surly letter he has sent his wife imposing impossible conditions on her for his return has driven Helena to accept all the burden of guilt upon herself. We find her next in Act 3, Scene 5, on her pilgrimage, having arrived, according to the stage directions, in Florence. Now, if you need to get your text, pause me and I'll be here when you get back. Okay, first of all, a note. As far as we know, Florence was never a stop on the pilgrim's route to St. James le Grand or St. Jacques le Grand, the famous Camino de Santiago in Spain. Nor, in fact, does Florence have a port, as the characters suggest. So it's tempting with our modern-day knowledge of geography to read something sinister into Helen's presence in Florence, as if she went there and way out of the way of her pilgrimage, specifically to confront Bertram. But Shakespeare suggests no such thing. Indeed, in both the source and the Shakespeare, her departure on a pilgrimage is real, and Florence does seem to be on the way. And the presence of the estranged husband and wife in Florence at the same time, a sheer coincidence. With that firmly in mind, we proceed. In the rest of the play, from this point on, I count 7 more extended female speeches, and only 3 of them spoken by Helena, and they are all plot-oriented monologues, no soliloquies. A minor character, Mariana, also gets a monologue, while Diana, the young Florentine virgin whom Helena replaces in bed, has a soliloquy and 2 monologues. So we don't get into Helena's mind very much in the last half of the play. And frankly, there is little evidence of the psychological churn and self-questioning that was so evident in the first half of the play. Once Helena finds that her husband is in town and courting a young virgin, the proactive Helena returns with a vengeance, with very few signs of her submissive alter ego. Even her deep sense of the spiritual, whether in winning or losing, seems to disappear, replaced by the simple mantra she repeats, "All's well that ends well," which either denotes an implicit trust in Providence that all will end well in spite of current obstacles, or less piously, something more like the end justifies the means, which promises that all the lies and deceits that she finds herself committing and encouraging others to commit may be justified by her good intentions and their ultimate success. Now, on to the speeches. Mariana, a neighbor of the widow, has the first monologue, Act 3, Scene 5, lines 18 to 28. It's an extended warning to Diana about the untrustworthiness of seducers and their go-betweens. Besides laying out the necessary expository information that Bertram and Parolles are in the city and busily engaged in their seduction, the monologue also lays out the general female attitude towards such men, an attitude perhaps sadly gained from experience, as Mariana is occasionally portrayed on stage as pregnant herself. Helena arrives to find herself the subject of gossip and some sympathy, and carefully conceals her identity to gain more information. By the way, we also find out from this scene that pilgrim she may be, but she is not without monetary resources, something also very clear in the original story. Now, in the last segment, I mentioned that what happens next is unexpected. By that, I did not mean necessarily the twists in the plot, including the bed trick and the meeting of impossible conditions and the riddling exposure and humiliation of Bertram, followed by their highly dubious marriage. What I meant was the nearly total absence of a complicated inner life for Helena, something Shakespeare provided us with in the first half of the play in spades. Instead, we see a side of Helena the play has not thus far prepared us well for. She is a woman of real agency, and by that I mean she is a woman of quick and complex action. Her earlier confidence seemed to have been simultaneously in her father's skill in his famous prescription or receipt, and in some kind of divine destiny attached to it. Receipt, by the way, is the Renaissance term for prescription. It's also the source, by the way, of our logo for drugstores. It's not RX, but R crossed T. Anyway, as Helena told the Countess, there's something in it more than my father's skill, which was the greatest of his profession, that his good receipt shall from my legacy be sanctified by the luckiest stars in heaven. So she believes now, as she did then, in both luck, and that in her case, some luck may be star-sanctioned and indistinguishable from destiny, and destiny from God's providence. If this sounds familiar, we might recall that Shakespeare was writing Hamlet right about this time. There's a special providence in the fall of a sparrow, and there's a divinity shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. So in this play, an occasion, an accident of fate presents itself, and the new Helena sets to work taking advantage of it with little mental emotional churning. She does not debate its rightness or wrongness with herself, though she defends it morally and with Jesuitical precision to the widow and her daughter. She trusts that all will be well, and does in her last two monologues, as we shall see, give heaven some credit for the success of the plan, but mostly she seems to trust in her own skills, which turn out to be pretty impressive. This change in Helena, though largely unremarked upon by herself, is obvious to the audience. It is akin, I think, to the famous sea change in Hamlet, when by chance at sea he found and altered his own death warrant, and then by bold action survived the attack of the pirates. Hamlet called it readiness. Helena exhibits this readiness without naming it when she responds to her luck with amazing facility, both for planning and for deceiving. The original story, by the way, did prepare the reader for Helena's management skills. In the Boccaccio story, the Helena character spent 2 years managing the Resilient estate brilliantly in the absence of her husband before setting off on her pilgrimage, where she was equally surprised to meet up with her husband in Florence. We shall look at the rest of the story and these two monologues of Helen's in our next segment. Till when, I'm Dakin Matthews, sheltering with Shakespeare.